They came right out of the pages of a Buck Rogers comic book. Rocket-powered fighter planes and guided missiles. When Winston Churchill learned that the Germans had made these science fiction fantasies a reality, he shivered in dread. England would be their natural target.
One slim hope that Hitler had, as the war is obviously not going well for Germany, is that in the conventional forces of panzer divisions and Stukas and bombers and all of that is obviously not going to win the war for you. You're losing the war. So what is? Why keep hanging on? It's because of the wonder weapons, the so-called wonder weapons that are being developed, the jet fighters, the rockets, the V-1, the V-2.
In the late 1930s, many aircraft companies were hard at work on designs for jet aircraft. Hitler saw potential in this and ordered further development of several designs. One of the earliest and best known was the Me-262.
The Messerschmitt 262, of course, was the Luftwaffe's a twin-jet, a turbojet interceptor that achieved limited operational use during the last year of the Second World War. This truly was a generational leap in aircraft design. It was powered by two UMO 004 turbojets, and it packed a battery of 30mm cannon, all mounted in the nose. One Allied pilot who encountered a 262 and survived described the airplane firing at him. It says it was like staring into the gas ring of a stove, just a ring of blue fire coming out of the front of the aircraft.
Tactic-wise, we could not catch them. We didn't have any reason to turn with them. And the only time that an Me-262 was shot down was either on takeoff or landing when it was most vulnerable.
We had a government with brains and guts, you know. It wouldn't have been a D-Day. I would have taken 100 262, 1,000 bomb on and bombed the shit out of the ships over there. Second, Pearl Harbor. Easy. Lose 10% of the airplane, lose them. So what? They wouldn't even have lost them because we were too fast.
We saw them going through an adjoining group formation, and they came through faster than anything we'd ever seen.
The first time I saw them, I was flying top cover for a dive bombing mission, and one came in at us. And I was on the right side of the bombers weaving, and I heard somebody holler, bogey at 2 o'clock, and I looked over and saw this plane coming in. And I hollered, I got him. And I turned to go at him, and as I was turning, he went by me so fast, I could not believe what I saw, and went out the other side and was gone.
The Me-262 entered service late in the war without being technically ready and suffered from a lack of pilot training and extreme fuel shortages.
The problem with the German jets was really a technical problem and an engineering problem. The airplane was simply not ready for combat.
Introducing a new airplane completely different from the standard way of designing an airplane suffered from new materials, different materials, and small building schedules.
Me-262s, boy, they were fast, but they were only good for about one pass. They don't have enough fuel to make one pass.
The Me-262 was not the only German jet design and development. One of these took a radically different approach to jet aircraft.
The 163 was a rocket-propelled interceptor. Rocket propulsion achieved a lot of interest in the interwar period as the next great frontier, and the Germans were among the world's leaders in this case, liquid fuel rocket technology. This rocket-propelled interceptor would take off, rapidly blast to a high altitude, and then execute a combination of diving and powered attack, basically making one pass on an Allied bomber formation, hopefully shoot down a bomber on a single pass, and then a dive out of harm's way.
They would come screaming down through the formation, and I don't know that I could even track them with the turret because they were going so fast.
The problem with the 163 is its combination of fuels, to include a hydrogen peroxide and water mixture, were almost unbelievably volatile. There was one documented case of a 163 making a rough landing, and the fuel lines were fractured, and the pilot was found dissolved in his cockpit from the caustic fuel. On other cases, the aircraft would explode while being fueled up. If there was any fuel left in the tanks on the landing, a bumpy landing would often cause the airplane to explode. It killed far more of its pilots in accidents than it shot down Allied aircraft. Truly a desperate last-minute expedient.
At Peenemünde, Germany's secret test site on the Baltic coast, scientists worked hard on both jet aircraft technology and Hitler's rocketry project. Some of Germany's most brilliant minds raced against the clock to perfect rocket engines and guidance systems for these new weapons. Among these scientists was Dr. Wernher von Braun, who would become a critical player in America's space program after the war.
German rocket scientists who, like von Braun and the rest of them, had a desire really to have fun with rockets. They wanted to go to the moon and everything.
But Hitler has a program, and he's hoping that these weapons are going to end up giving Germany the extra edge it needs at the last minute, at the 11th hour.
Von Braun's biography, I think, was We Aim for the Stars, and the subtitle for that was But We Kept Hitting London.
Two different versions of these rocket weapons, dubbed the V-1 and V-2, were rushed into production. The V designation stood for the German word for weapons of revenge. Launched from a ramp, the 25-foot-long V-1 looked like a small airplane without a cockpit.
The V-1 was called the buzz bomb, and it was basically a ramjet.
Hitler had planned and called for and demanded that the Germans be able to produce, fire 8,000 of those a month beginning in January 1944. Had they been able to do that, they might really have interfered with the invasion plan, because while they were not hardly precision, I mean, they at least got in the area, and that would have been a heavy, dangerous component. But our strategic bombing, prevented their buildup, and so their firing got off after the invasion, and it was at a very low level.
We started hearing about strange explosions up in London. They said, it doesn't sound like an airplane, but all of a sudden there's this whoosh, boom, wiping out a whole block. And suddenly, in our area, we were down south, we started getting buzz bombs.
You could hear them coming, put, 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 put. And when they stopped, that's when everybody, and boy, they sure make a hole all right.
V-1, ironically, caused more consternation on the Allies because they could actually do something about it. They could try and intercept it, so they pulled a lot of fighters back from escort duty, and instead of going against German fighters, they went against the V-1s. In addition, a lot of anti-aircraft units were set up to try and intercept these V-1s.
You could see them coming in on the radar, and they'd call up a pilot and say, you've got one unit, such and such, get up behind them and blow them out of the air. They got the idea of flying up alongside and tipping the wing of the flying bomb with their own wing. And that upset, they flew on an artificial horizon, a gyro, to stabilize the flying bomb. And that would tip that gyro off, and then it would crash land. And but then we understand they kind of had to quit that because the Germans got a little smart, put a little pressure switch under the wings, so that if you happen to lean on that switch, you'd blow yourself and the flying bomb all to hell.
Altogether, the Germans fired over 10,000 buzz bombs at England, but only about 3,500 got through the Allied defenses to hit their targets. 46 feet long and rocket-powered, the V-2 was a much greater menace. It was launched vertically, and although it had a sophisticated guidance system for the time, it was inaccurate.
The V-2 was not a precision missile by today's standards. It was very, very inaccurate. You were lucky to hit a target within 5 miles of the aim point.
From September 1944 until the war's end, Germany launched over 1,000 V-2s with their 1-ton warheads against England. The V-2 could not be heard before it struck its target, and radar could not track it. There was no defense against the V-2.
officer took us into the filter room, which was off to one side. And he looked very upset. In fact, he was white. And there was a somber mood in there. And he said, young ladies, I have to tell you something. I feel I should tell you this. And that is that there's something new, and it's called a V2. And it can't be plotted. It's too fast. It can't be plotted, and it will be devastating.
Boy, when those suckers hit, well, it was just like the New York tower situation. They had to destroy large segments of London, and they weren't targeted any place in particular either.
When the V2 missiles start striking in the fall of 1944, Churchill becomes concerned that if they start falling in the numbers that the V1 did, that there's going to be a serious problem because they can't be shot down. And there's been some recent archival discoveries that suggest that the British government was planning to ask the United States to use the atomic bomb against Germany as soon as possible as an antidote to or as a response to the German V2 missile attacks. In reality, that never takes place, in part because the atomic bomb isn't ready yet, but also because the V2 threat doesn't materialize. There are so many technical problems with the V2 that the number of attacks is somewhat limited.
As far as Germany was concerned, it's a total waste of resources. They're made with slave labor under terrible conditions, and it was altogether an ignoble weapon.
Technical problems, poor manufacturing, and Allied bombing all took their toll on the wonder weapons. Had Hitler's Reich been given more time to perfect them, they might have changed the course of the war. Fortunately, they failed to turn the tide for Germany, but they did point the way to the future of warfare. After the Third Reich surrendered, the scientists of Peenemünde ended up either in the Soviet Union or in the United States, where they continued developing rocket technologies. The V2 program became the foundation for the space race and intercontinental ballistic missiles. Jet aircraft and long-range guided weapons are mainstays of modern military operations. As we enter the 21st century, the legacy of Hitler's wonder weapons continues to affect our world.